right, but I think we're gonna get started with the introduction. So thanks a lot for being here on time. So my name is Alexander Bregman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Invitely. Thanks a lot for joining us for our webinar series. This is already second, third, fourth. I hope you've been joining before. We have a lot of people joining from all over the world, over 40 countries. So thank you very, very much for joining for this webinar. We have people, both Invitely users joining. Thanks a lot for coming back and for using our service. And we have actually a lot of people joining that are completely new to Invitely. So if you're new, and I hope a lot of you are as well, please go check out our community. It's a professional community where we really help our members grow professionally and achieve their professional goals. So check it out. Go to invitely.co, get an account, and we're actually going to send you an email with a special promotion. So stay tuned for that after the webinar. Now, today I'm very happy to welcome Phil Waknell from our partner IDEASONSTAGE. It was an excellent presenter. He's really going to teach you amazing skills. It's going to be a 45-minute presentation, and I think we all have a lot of experience presenting. No matter where you are in your career, you have to present at a certain time, and you always need to improve your skills there, right? So folks like Phil really are really strong in this field. I've been following him for a long time already myself, really picking up bits here and there. Very interesting. I'm very happy that he's joining us here today. So again, thank you a lot for joining us for this webinar. A lot of you are already here live, so that's very good. We're going to get started. Okay, so on the logistics, there's a couple of things. If you're not really familiar with the tool we're using, it's called Livestorm. You can ask questions, and you should definitely ask questions. And you can answer polls. And I believe there's already a poll live, so feel free to have a look at that during our presentation. So if you're going to ask questions, and please do ask questions, we will answer them at the end. Okay, so we're going to have some 10-15 minutes at the end to really get through the questions and make sure you really understand and be able to answer everything. And that's pretty much it for the logistics. So enjoy the presentation. I'm welcoming here on stage Phil Waknell, so please join me here. And he's going to take it over from me. So again, enjoy, and thank you very much for being here.
Thanks very much, Alexander. Thanks. So good day to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, and thanks so much to Alexander and all of the team at Invitely for organizing this webinar, which I hope you will all enjoy. So, as Alexander said, my name is Phil. I am the Chief Inspiration Officer at IDEASONSTAGE. So we are presentation specialists. We've been helping people to save audiences from a painful death by boredom or bullet points for 10 years now. And so we've saved a lot of audiences. Today, we're hoping we can help you to save your audiences. Because let's be honest, most presentations need a revolution. So this webinar is called the Business Presentation Revolution. And that's because business presentations really need one. Now, most presentations don't rhyme with inspiration or motivation. They end up rhyming with boredom. So this is the typical audience that we will see in a business presentation. So for a communication specialist like me, this is a crime scene. This is something which we cannot afford to see in any of our audiences, because this is an audience which is not going to do what you need them to do. Every time we're presenting for a reason. It's not to bore people, it's not to take up their time. There has to be an objective for it. And whatever your objective, an audience which is sleeping is not going to do what you need them to do. So I'd like to start by really understanding what you don't like about typical business presentations. So this is where we have the poll. Alexander already said that we can have that. So have a look at that. You'll see that probably on the right of your screen. And we've got 5 different possibilities on what you hate most about typical presentations. So do you hate that there's too much text on the slide? Do you hate that the speaker is speaking in a monotonous voice? Or possibly the speaker who turns their back on their audience and reads their slides, knowing that the audience can actually read faster than the speaker can speak, right? Or maybe it's that there's just too much information in the overall presentation, or perhaps it's all of the above. So take a moment to answer that. I see that we already have several answers, and the most popular at the moment is all of the above. It's all of these are problems. So very clearly we can see that we need a real revolution. It's not just a small change. We need to completely change the way we think about presentations, the way we prepare them, and the way we deliver them. And that's even more important nowadays because with a lot of us having to work remotely, from home, from a different place, from a cafe, wherever it might be, but actually with a lot of meetings being cancelled and a lot of presentations happening online, well, like this one, it's really important to make sure that you grab and keep your audience's attention all the way through, because when you're in a meeting room with people, you can see what they're doing. And if they decide that they're going to get out their phone and check their Facebook, well, you can check that they're doing that. When you're on a webinar like this or a web meeting with 20 or more people, you don't know what your people are doing. You don't know whether the participants are actually listening or not, and they know that you don't know. So grabbing and keeping their attention is even more important. And so that is why we're going to have to apply these revolutions. It's even more important now than it was before. So what are these revolutions that we need to be doing? Well, I'm going to tell you about 5. The first one is, always remember, it is not your presentation, it's theirs. So this presentation that I'm giving to you now is not mine. This is yours. It's intended for you to help you to present better and to get your ideas across so that you can generate the right kind of actions. This is your presentation. So that means that what I've done for you today is made to measure. This is not exactly the same thing that I give when I'm giving a business presentation course at a business school like HEC Paris or EM Lyon or one of these big business schools. No, this is something which is going to be really different and made to measure for this webinar. The second revolution is you should aim not to inform people, but to transform them. I'm going to come back to this later, but it's really, really important to understand if you aim only to give information in a webinar or in any kind of presentation, well, people will forget most of what they hear very quickly. Revolution number 3 is that you have to create your story before your slides. This is a real problem that we have. Typical business presentation, I need to give a presentation tomorrow morning. It's late at night. What do? I open my computer, I start typing in PowerPoint, and then 40 slides later, I give up, I stop, I go to bed. Next day, I get into the meeting room. What do? I connect up the projector, I show my slides, I turn my back on the audience, and I read my bullet points, and then I improvise, because I don't actually know what I'm supposed to be saying. This is not a good way to present. So we first need to say, let's stop putting the cart before the horse. We will work out what we're going to say, and then we ask ourselves the question, do I need to illustrate this with any kind of slide? And if so, what will help my audience? So getting it in the right order is very important. The fourth revolution is not to confuse slides with documents. PowerPoint is a great tool, but it's so useful that you can use it for a lot of things. And sometimes we will produce documents in PowerPoint and then we'll project them on the wall behind us. But a slide does not make a good document, and a document does not make a good slide. So we need to make the difference between documents and slides. And then the fifth revolution is when you're delivering it, don't aim to be perfect. Don't try and rehearse it 100 times so that you're absolutely perfect. Try to make a connection with people as much as possible. Try to make it personal. Try to tell them some examples and stories from your situation, from your life, from your experience, because when you share, they care. So those are the 5 really important revolutions that we need to be putting forward in the way we approach presentations. And as you see, some of these are actually really big changes, but they're all very easy to make. And we've helped loads of speakers to do this, and it's just by changing the way we approach presentations that we set ourselves up for success. And success can be measured with 5 criteria. The 5 key success factors of good presentations make up the word SCORE. The first is simple. A good presentation tries not to say too much, but what it does say, it says it well. Here on the screen we have a simple clock. You will notice that on this clock we just have the hours and the seconds. Sorry, the hours and the minutes. We don't have the seconds. We don't have the date. We don't have the phases of the moon. We just have the very basic stuff. Same with the presentation. If you try to say too much, people will remember less, not more. So what you leave out gives power to what you leave in. Keep it simple, and that will help your audience to get your messages. The second success factor is to make things clear. This means your structure should be clear, your objective should be clear, your slides should be clear to see from the back of the room, your voice should be clear to hear for people at the back of the room. All of that is really important. And I'm illustrating this with another clock, or in fact two clocks, because here on the Tower of Westminster, or the Queen Elizabeth Tower as it's now called, behind those clocks is Big Ben, the big bell, and that big bell needs to be heard from a long distance, just as those clocks need to be easy to see from a long distance, just like your slides. And the tower is neatly structured in that beautiful neo-Gothic style, just as your presentation needs a clear structure too. So that's simple and clear. The third key success factor is to make things original. Here we have another clock, but it's not the kind of clock you've seen before. Why? Because we pay more attention to new things. We pay more attention to things which look like we haven't seen them before. And that can make all the difference to the attention your audience gives to your presentation. We also need to make things related. So here I've illustrated this with some clockwork. You see the time theme running through here. Well, like all of the little cogs and wheels in a watch, everything needs to work together. That means firstly, your presentation needs to be related to your audience and their needs, but also the context of the presentation. It also needs to be a situation where what you show on the screen behind you or next to you in this webinar needs to be related to what you are saying at the time. And then you need to be connected, related to your audience, make it interactive where possible, make it something which is clearly their presentation, and create that contact through your eyes and through your gestures. Simple, clear, original, related. We've got to have an E, and that is enjoyable. A good presentation needs to be enjoyable. Now you might think that, okay, well, the others are important, but enjoyable? Yeah, you know what? This is going to be a quarterly project update. That's not going to be enjoyable, but have an extra coffee and we'll all live through it. No. Enjoyable is necessary. This is not just the icing on the cake. This is the key to get into the cake tin. Because if you don't make your presentation enjoyable to listen to, people won't be paying attention. And if they're not paying attention, it doesn't matter what you say. So I've illustrated this one with an hourglass or a sand timer. You need to imagine that the attention of your audience is like the grains of sand in this sand timer. And there's only a limited number. So after a short time, all of those grains of sand will run out. And it's up to you as the speaker to turn over that sand timer and reset their attention. So regularly, it's up to you to reset their attention during the presentation. And it's up to you to find out the way to do that. So we're going to cover all of these points. If we put all of these together, then we get simple, clear, original, related, and enjoyable. And you'll notice that there is a P up there with the acronym at the top, which makes this PSCORE. Rest assured, P does not stand for Phil. This is not me, not for me. This is what's called the presentation score method, or PSCORE for short. So this is the method that I'm going to share with you today in a very brief overview. These are the steps that we take to succeed in making a presentation which actually manages all of these 5 key success factors. And there are five steps to presentation success within the PSCORE process. So let me share those with you now. The first is the foundation stage. This is where you lay the foundation to make sure that you can be successful. This is by understanding who you're presenting to and why they are there listening to you. Then you move into the ideation phase. This is where you come up with all of the ideas you can think of for what you can say or show or do to achieve the transformations you need to achieve in your audience. Then, and only then, you're ready to start creating your presentation. And remember, we don't put the cart before the horse. We're not talking about slides here. This is where we will organize all of our ideas into a suitable storyline with a great introduction, a great conclusion, and that we keep people's attention throughout. Once we know what we're going to say, then we can illustrate it. So if we need some slides or any other visual aids, this is where we work out what we're going to use and we design those slides. And then finally, you've got to deliver your presentation. So this is what we call the connection phase. And we say connection because the idea is that you're making a connection with your audience so that they can do something. So I'm going to cover all of these really, really fast today, and I hope they will generate in you a desire to know more, a desire to think, okay, this sounds smart, how can I take this to the next level? And we'll talk more about that towards the end of the session today. So let's start with phase one. Let's start with this foundation phase. Now, what is this and why do we have a big digger on there? Well, if you're going to be creating a building, if you're going to build any kind of building, you need to have a strong foundation. If you're building it on sand, it's not going to stand up very long. The foundation phase is something that most presenters don't do. They completely skip it because they're going straight away to what do I want to say to this audience. So you need to forget about that. So we don't have like a JCB on this digger, as you might find on many diggers, but we do have an ABC because those are the three key letters of this foundation phase. And they stand for, firstly, your audience. Who are you speaking to? Secondly, their burning needs. What is it that keeps them awake at night? Why are they listening to you? What are they expecting from you? So this isn't your objectives, it's their objectives. And then the third thing is the context. In what situation are you speaking? Are you at a conference where there are several other speakers who are going to be talking? If so, what are they talking about? How long do you have? Do you have, like today, 45 minutes plus time for a question and answer session? Or do you have a different time? Do you have the possibility to show slides? Do you have a microphone? If so, what kind? But also, what's the audience's context? What's their situation? Is their business suffering because of the current virus lockdown? Or are they struggling to keep up with demand, like some of the delivery companies, for example? That's part of the context of your audience. So always understand this. It might only take you 5 minutes to ask yourself, who am I speaking to? What is keeping them awake at night and why are they here? And then what is the context of this presentation? But believe me, it's the 5 most important minutes you will spend. So, like one of my former clients, Clément Casalot, is a great French entrepreneur, currently at Techstars. He said this wonderful thing: don't fall in love with your product, fall in love with your client's problem. And I love that. So if I apply that to presentations, it's always fall in love with your audience's needs. It's their presentation, make it about them and work out how you can touch their needs. So that's the revolution from the foundation phase. It's not your presentation, it's theirs. Now we can move on to the ideation phase. So this is where we try to come up with the ideas as to how we achieve our objectives. But you know what? First, we need objectives. That's important. Now, most presentations actually don't do the ideation phase because their aim is only to inform the audience. Now, the problem is your audience will forget most of what they hear very quickly. If you want to share information, give people a document and a coffee. It's so much more powerful. But a presentation is great, not for informing, but for transforming an audience, for changing something in what they believe, in what they feel, in what they do. So ask yourself, if I were to complete this sentence, how would I finish it? After this presentation, my audience will, what will they do? So my objective for today is, I would say, after this presentation, you, members of the audience for this webinar, will apply these techniques to your next presentation. You will try out the PSCORE process. You will want to know more. So here we've got some desires, etc. If my objective was only, after this presentation, the audience will know the PSCORE process, but then nobody actually uses it, did I succeed? No. So it's got to be an action or a feeling or a belief. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on this today because we don't really have the time, but we have a great tool which we've shared online, which is called the Audience Transformation Roadmap. You can find more about this at IDEASONSTAGE.com, and you can also find it in the TEDx talk, which I did back in November, which covers the 3 magic ingredients of great presentations. This is a very simple tool which helps you to understand where is your audience before and what do you need them to do, to feel, to believe, and to know after your presentation. And that gives you your transformational objectives. And then it also helps you to brainstorm all of the ideas of what you can say and show and do to achieve those transformations. We use this with our clients all the time, all over the world, in all sorts of different industries, and it's powerful. I was sharing it with a journalist just last week, for example. We did an actual real session on a real presentation with one of my clients. And at the end of it, she looked at it and said, "That's magic." And indeed it is. It's not me that's magic. It's just using the tool. It just works. So give that a try. It's a very powerful technique, and you'll find that on IDEASONSTAGE.com, but also in the TEDx talk, which we'll share at the end of this talk. So next, the final revolution there for the ideation phase is aim not to inform, but to transform your audience. So now we've got all of these ideas as to how we're going to transform our audience. Now we need to put them in a structure. And this is where we get into the creation phase. So in the creation phase, where we have a whole lot of sticky notes here, well, this is where you arrange those sticky notes in a suitable structure. Now, it was thousands of years ago that Aristotle gave us a simple structure. And we're going to come to that in a moment. But before we think about the overall structure for your whole presentation, we need to start off, remember those success criteria, we need to start off with making it simple. So this is where we get into the idea of an elevator pitch. So I noticed there are some people online from Orange today. One of my clients is a guy from Orange. He runs the Technocentre, I believe, and he's called Luc Breton. And he's a fantastic, very smart guy. And he says, I usually only remember one thing from a pitch. So just tell me what I need to know, no more. Now remember, this is a very smart guy. And he knows he forgets most of what he hears. So it's important to keep it simple. If you're going to make a presentation to Luc, you know that you really want to keep it to 5 minutes. You also know that he's very likely at the end, at the last minute, to say, I'm really sorry, I don't have time, so just tell me what I need to know, what I need to do. So that's where you give the elevator pitch. Now, some of you may have heard of the elevator pitch. This is where you just give a short, like a 30-second version of your pitch. Imagine you've only got 30 seconds to deliver your presentation. What do you say? And so that's where we apply the 70 rule. This is not a speed limit. This is a word limit. So you just create a very simple elevator pitch using 70 words. And that is around about what you can say in 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, I generally recommend that you try to answer these 3 very important questions that will be on your audience's mind. The first is, what are you trying to say to me? What is your key message? What do you need me to do, for example? But really, what is that key message? If they understand the key message, then they'll be interested in the so what? Why should I care? What's in it for me? And if they understand why it's important and relevant to them, then they'll be interested in what next? Okay, I understand your message. I see why it's important. What's happening next? What do you need from me? Now, what you'll notice, if you put those into 30 seconds, firstly, you've got a very short version of your presentation, and it's a shortcut to understand what is absolutely the key part of your presentation. What you'll also see is it makes a very good conclusion. So when we come on After the simple phase, we move on to the second step of creation and try to use a clear structure. Well, we start off with the clear structure that Aristotle gave us, which was making things basically with a clear introduction, a clear conclusion, and then a development in between. Well, the conclusion, you've actually done that because you've got your what, your so what, and your what next. And if you find that you need to deliver your presentation and then someone says, I'm really sorry, the previous guys overran, so you don't have very much time, well, then you give them the conclusion because it has your key messages, you know why the audience should care, and you've got the call to action. When I'm writing a speech for a business leader, I always start at the end. I always start with the conclusion because I'm like a satellite navigation system. Right? You want to go somewhere, you tell the satellite navigation, where do you want to go? And then it finds the route to get you there. If I work out what the conclusion of the presentation is, then I can find the best things to say to reach that conclusion in my longer presentation. And that works really well. One of the things I'd really like you to remember, though, is that the introduction and the conclusion are two really vital points of your presentation. The introduction, it's like a match. Imagine your presentation like a match, not a soccer match, but a match which is used to light a fire. Imagine that the introduction is like the head on the match. You strike the match and it bursts into flame. Then it keeps burning, and then at the end, it bursts into flame again. That's the introduction, and that's your conclusion, which need to be the important part. The introduction makes people want to listen, and the conclusion should make people want to act. So that's the very basic structure. Now you might say, okay, that's very good, but it's a little bit too basic because in some business situations we need something a little bit more elaborate. Yes, you always need a good introduction which grabs people's attention. You always need something good to say at the end which makes them want to act. But sometimes there are other structures. So I'm not going to go through many of them today. We don't really have the time. But here is one which works in a lot of good situations. You start off with the ideal. You explain how things should be. And then by contrast, you explain the reality. This is how things actually are. Then you explain why that reality is not ideal. That's the problem part. And then you can move on to your solution. Now you might say to me, why don't you just start with the solution, right? We need to keep things short, go straight in with the solution. But the thing is, the aim of the ideal, reality, problem is that it makes people want a solution, makes them want to hear their solution. So you might find in a 10-minute presentation, you do the ideal, reality, problem in maybe 2 minutes, and then the solution in another 7 minutes, and then you've got 1 minute for your conclusion at the end to remind them of what you've said and what you need them to do with it. But the contrast between the ideal and the reality, between the problem and the solution, is what makes this extremely powerful. So in an ideal world, all presentations would rhyme with communication, motivation, and inspiration. In the real world, most presentations fail. Why? Because people are simply adopting the same old attitudes to PowerPoint and to presentations that they have learned from their elders. They're still using a lot of bullet points. They're still not preparing. They're not rehearsing. And they haven't actually been trained on effective presentations. The solution? Well, follow this webinar for a start. Follow these training courses, buy this book, etc., etc., etc. You get the picture, right? So that's why this is a very, very useful structure. So have a look for that. Think how you can structure it in a way which is going to be clear for you, clear for your audience, and which will help you to achieve your objectives. Now, those are the first 2 phases of creation. So we create just the elevator pitch, which is kind of your conclusion. We then create a clear structure. Afterwards, we need to make it a little bit more original. So we try to add in something which is going to make it stand out, something new. So it was Coco Chanel who said, in order to be irreplaceable, one must always be different. People pay more attention to what they haven't seen before. So this is where you can build in the art of storytelling. This is where, if your whole overall presentation is like one big structure, one big story, you can then, inside that, put individual examples, individual stories, which will make it original, but also much more interesting to listen to. So that's one way to make it original. So you go through the structure you've already imagined, you plugged your ideas into that clear structure, the ones you came up with in the ideation phase. Now you just try to see, how can I jazz it up a little bit, add in some stories and examples to make it more original. We don't really need to make it more related at this point because it's already the audience's presentation. We've already made it about them and about the transformation we're trying to achieve in the audience. So we don't need to do more to make it related to them right now, but we do need to make it enjoyable. Now, why is this important? This is where that hourglass comes in. Remember, we need to turn over the hourglass regularly. It is not up to your audience to make an effort to pay attention to what you're saying. It is up to you to make the effort to deserve their attention. So what are you going to say, show, and do to actually turn over that hourglass? This is vital, right? This is vital. It was Samuel Johnson who said the true art of memory is the art of attention. If you want them to remember stuff, you need them to be paying attention in the first place. So it's really up to you to make them care. If they're paying attention, then they might take an action. If not, they won't. And in order to have their attention, you do have to give them some kind of enjoyment. This does not mean you tell jokes all the time. Right? This does not mean you get out all of your British humor or your Monty Python gags or whatever it might be. No, it's business presentations. They can be serious, but make them enjoyable. Give them interesting structure, give them context, tell them stories, add in a video from time to time, surprise people from time to time, and that will turn over that hourglass and grab people's attention back again. And that's your responsibility. So if we add all that together, let me summarize those 3 steps of creating the presentation. So first, the conclusion. What next in about half a minute. Second, clear structure. You plug in all of your ideas from the previous brainstorming in the ideation phase, put them into that structure, and then you're able to make the third step, which is to give it a bit of color, to add the chocolate chips to your cookie, if you like, by adding in the little videos, the surprise, the stories, the things which will make it original and enjoyable. So that's what we do with our clients, and generally that 3-phase approach to creation works really well. So remember the revolution in this phase: always create your story before you start thinking about your slides. That's a really important revolution. So now we are able to move on to the illustration phase. So in the illustration phase, this is where we ask ourselves, do I need something visual to accompany what I'm saying, which is going to help my audience, which is going to make my messages more memorable or more easy to understand? This is not my cue card, right? The slides are not something which I as the speaker or you as the speaker should use to remind you what you're supposed to be saying. That's not the intention. It's intended that they are there for your audience. So what are you going to say? What you're not going to do is do something like this. Does this look familiar? Right? This is the typical sort of slide that you will see in presentations in companies all over the world. Now, I already told you earlier on that people can't read and listen at the same time, right? But many of you are still trying to read this slide. You're looking at it and thinking, I better make sure I read that, because otherwise that slide is going to disappear. And if the slide disappears, oh, I was reading that, I missed it. Oh no. So I'm going to put it back because I'm nice, okay? I'm not really all that sadistic. But the thing is, if I show a screen like this, then I am going to have to turn my back on the audience. And that means that, I can't create a good connection with an audience using my back. I'm sorry. It might be my best side, but I'm not going to create a connection that way. So no, you need to be looking at your audience. They might want to look sometimes at your slides. But if you put all this text up there, they will read faster than you do, and they will not be listening. So this is an obstacle to communication, and that's really not very helpful. So we've got to stop doing that. That is not helpful. So we're going to learn how to score with our slides. Now, before I go into the simple, clear, original, related, enjoyable once more, let me just remind you at this point, we're about halfway through here, let me remind you that you can ask questions already now and I'll be coming to those once we've got to the end of phase 5. Then I'll be answering all of your questions, or at least all of those, which my colleagues here recommend that I get answered. So please do put those in, and we'd like to make this as interactive as we can. So back to the slides. So first, we need to make things simple. So remember, here we have just the hours and the minutes. It's very simple. This is the kind of slide you can understand in only 5 seconds. And that's important. Because if your audience needs more than 5 seconds to understand what is on your screen, then they've stopped listening to you. And that's a problem, because you need them to be paying attention. So consider this particular slide here, this one that I'm showing here, it has simply a picture and the word 5 seconds. You can understand that really quickly. Now let's take another example. Can you understand this one in 5 seconds? No, absolutely no chance. You could take 5 minutes and you still wouldn't understand it. So always remember that you need to make things as simple as possible. And if you've got a lot of things that need to be there, ask yourself, can it be more than one slide? Can it be several slides? Because a slide does not have a duration. A slide does not take 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. It's what you say that takes the time. The slide is just there to illustrate what you've decided to say. And if I'm going to speak for 1 minute with about 130 words, well then, it doesn't matter whether that's with 0 slides or 1 slide or 10 slides, it's still 1 minute. So by all means, split it up into multiple slides, and as long as they can understand them in 5 seconds, the audience won't mind. Second part then is to make things clear. So here we have the clocks which need to be visible from a distance. Well, you need to make sure all of your text is easy to read. Now, you probably can't read this text on your screen here. Here's the same text. It's just as simple, but it's much easier to read. Imagine the people in a live room standing or sitting at the back. You've got to make sure everything is big enough for them to read from the back of the room. Or if you're doing something online, make sure it's big enough that someone can read it when they're looking on their smartphone. Also, the contrast is important. If you have a projector screen, the contrast will be much worse than what we have here, which is simply white on black or black on white if you need to. So just try to make sure contrast is not going to be a problem for people. So that's making things clear. Making them original, well, how do you make slides original? What you don't want to do is to fall into the déjà vu that we've seen with so many slides, where they have a white background. Like 95% of boring slides have a white background. Do you need a white background? Why tire your audience's eyes with all that extra unnecessary light? Much easier to do what we see in the latest versions of Apple's Mac OS with the dark mode. It's much easier on people's eyes. So don't put all this light if you don't need to. Here we have bullet points. We have the stick man clip art with the light bulb above his head. That was cool in 1996, but so was the Macarena. It's not cool anymore. So avoid all of this, and then you'll be able to stand out and be original with your presentations. Produce something which looks like you, which looks like your brand, but which doesn't look like things they've seen before. And then you'll be able to stand out. We need to make things not just original, but also related to our audience. So this is where what we show on the screen needs to be related to what we are saying at the time. Not before, not after. Now, I learned this lesson the hard way. I used to be a sales director at Hewlett-Packard. And I remember I was preparing a sales presentation for a client, and I had a slide which looked a bit like this one. And so, yes, it had a white background. Right? Yes, it had bullet points. I'm sorry, I wasn't always a presentation specialist. I learned sometimes the hard way. So I had some short bullet points like you can see on the screen here, and there was room for something else. So I thought, yeah, it looks a bit empty and ugly without anything. So I looked in the template of the photos I was able to use, and I found one which was just the right size and shape, and I put a skyscraper on there, a nice picture of a real nice tall building. And I thought, that looks a little bit less ugly, right? In the meeting with the client, I was going through my presentation quite nicely, and then the client stopped me on this slide and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Waknell, why do you have a picture of a skyscraper on your screen?" I had no good answer to that question. I couldn't tell him, well, my slide looked ugly without it. I couldn't say, this is your building. It wasn't. I couldn't say, this is my building. It wasn't. It made me realize that if you're going to show something which isn't directly related to what you're saying, then it can really dilute, or in some cases kill, the audience's attention to what you're saying. So never show something on the screen unless it is related to what you're saying at the time. And then the last thing here, of course, we've got to make your slides enjoyable. So I don't have time to go through what usually is like a one-day course on how to design enjoyable slides. What I hope I've been able to do in this webinar is to work by example, by showing you some slides which are the kind of things where when you click, people are interested in seeing what they're going to see, which are designed in a way which is not only original, but also which has a certain style, a certain coherent style, with a coherent color palette, with the right choice of fonts and not too many fonts, etc., but which is actually going to make people want to discover each of your next slides. So I can only encourage you to read fantastic books like Slideology by Nancy Duarte or Presentation Zen Design by Gar Reynolds, and you will learn a lot from those books. They will change the way you prepare your slides. So I strongly recommend those two books for you. So we put all of that together and we should have slides which are simple, easy to understand in only 5 seconds. Clear, easy to see from the back of the room or on a phone. Original, things like not like everything they've seen before. Related to what you are saying at the time and enjoyable for the audience to look at. That will produce great, successful slides. So remember the revolution in this phase: don't confuse slides with documents. Don't try and kill two birds with one stone. A slide makes a bad document. A document makes a bad slide. So if you're going to be delivering a presentation, you might want to be giving something away before or after it as a handout, which you can put all the detail in so that during the live presentation, you don't feel the need to put all of that detail on the wall behind you or next to you. So today, just for your information, I'll be very happy to offer to all participants in this webinar the introduction to my forthcoming book, which is called The Business Presentation Revolution. And that will give you a very good summary of these 5 phases, of the 5 key success factors of PSCORE, and that will help you to remember what I've said today. So we'll come to that a little bit later. Now, the last phase, of course, is connection. So I'm not going to say a huge amount about that today. Connection is where you really try to deliver your presentation in a way which your audience is going to enjoy. So if you think about the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, great American writer and philosopher, all the great speakers were bad speakers at first. So what this means is nobody is born a great speaker. I have coached thousands of speakers over the last 10 years, and I can tell you not a single person I have seen, and I've seen some cases where people thought they were completely impossible. No, I've never found anybody who does not have the ability to become a great speaker. We all have it in us. We just need to awaken it and believe in ourselves and practice, because it does take work to become a successful speaker. But trust me, we all get nervous. We all worry about whether we're going to succeed. That's perfectly normal. But if you put in the work and you put in the practice and you work with some professionals, you can become a great speaker. And that's where you'll be able to apply scoring to your speaking. So imagine that you need to be simple. That means short sentences, easy words. Don't use acronyms or jargon or difficult words which your audience might not understand. Clear means speaking in a clear voice and not too quickly. Because if I speak far too quickly to you on this webinar, that's going to be a problem potentially with the sound, but also English is probably not your first language for many of you. Therefore, it's important that I give you the chance to understand what I'm saying, digest it, in some cases translate it, and then understand what it means for you. So that means leaving some pauses as well. Original means finding your own style, being yourself, because like Oscar Wilde said, everyone else is already taken. So find your own style, and work out what makes you comfortable as a speaker. Related means connecting with your audience, using eye contact, using gestures, and making your talk, making your presentation as interactive as possible so that the audience feels this is not just a monologue, but actually something they're participating in. And we'll be getting to your questions in a minute, and I hope that that will help you to feel like this really is an exchange. And of course, you need to make it enjoyable. And that means you need to show passion. You need to show that you believe in what you're saying, and you need to vary your voice, because the monotonous voice is not going to be interesting to listen to for very long, is it? So it's important that you vary your speed, your volume, your emotion, your tone, and that is what creates the interest for your audience to listen to you. So that's some of the stuff that we do in our coaching sessions or in our training courses on how to connect with an audience. And always remember the revolution in this piece. Aim not to be perfect, right? No one is ever going to be perfect. I've given presentations on stage hundreds of times, and I know that every time I think, maybe I should have done that a bit better, or maybe I should have done something different. I never get it perfect. Nobody does. Don't worry about it. Just try to make it personal, try to make a connection, try to connect from the heart, and people will appreciate that. So that brings us to the end of that piece. So I'm just going to move forward there. So those are those 5 steps: foundation, ideation, creation, illustration, and connection. And if you follow that process and you apply these 5 revolutions, then you will most definitely make that score with your audience. And that matters, because we all need to present. We all need to give presentations, whether they're online, whether they are in a room, whether they're in an amphitheater or just a small meeting room. We all need to present. And the success that we have in our presentation will help to define the success we have in our careers. That's why we should all care about it. And that's why you're here today. And I hope that you have got something useful out of this session. And I hope we're going to make it even more useful by answering your questions. So if you still have questions, please bring them in now. Type them into the questions tab. And I believe, Alex, we have some questions here. So what do we got?
All right, very good. Okay, so I'm going to help you answer a couple of questions.
Sure.
And we have already a couple of them here. So let's start with a question from Naveen. Naveen, I hope you're still there, so your question is going to be answered. He's looking for more examples of good slides. So I think you showed already a couple of them. Is there another resource people can go to and then check out good slides that you think are, good for inspiration, basically?
Okay, good slides for inspiration. Generally, I find that the slides on an Apple product launch, they're usually very good. They have very little text. They have a very Apple style. You can recognize Apple's presentations very easily. They usually use numbers. And they show those numbers clearly. They're very, very big, so they're easy to see on a smartphone, and everything's very, very clear. So that's one which I would recommend as a useful resource. And if you're interested in like decrypting the style that they use, there's a great book called The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs by Carmine Gallo. And that is a really good book which actually kind of explains how they succeeded with their slides. Right. Generally, I always recommend looking at TED Talks. So you go to TED.com, you'll see lots and lots of presentations there. And usually they're prepared with the help of communications experts. And that will ensure that those slides are not the walls of words you typically see in meeting rooms, but are actually effective slides. If you're looking for other examples, you should find some also on our website at IDEASONSTAGE.com, and we'll be happy to provide you some other examples on demand, so don't hesitate to ask.
Okay, great. There's a second part of this question, which is for sales pitches.
Yes.
Do you have examples for slides there? Are they much different? What are your thoughts there?
When it comes to a sales pitch, it always depends on how well your customer knows you. If your customer doesn't know you at all and you're basically going in there and explaining what you do, generally I find the best slides for a sales pitch are no slides at all. I actually find that when you're meeting someone for the first time, they're always worried about, oh God, we've got another salesperson, he's going to come in, he's going to connect up his projector and show us a whole load of slides. I find that when I'm working with clients, and I do sell my company services a lot, in 10 years, I have only ever used slides in a sales meeting once. And that was because they asked me to see some examples of slides. That was the only reason. I did not use slides to explain, this is Ideas on Stage, and this is what we do. Here are our training courses. Here are our coaching. Here are our great profiles. No, we discuss, we listen, we learn, we understand, and then sometimes we simply say, well, the client will say, okay, so tell me about you. What do you do at Ideas on Stage? And then we know exactly what to say because we've been listening. If you're doing a pitch, which is more of like a proposal presentation, so for example, you've sent a proposal and you've been asked to come and present, well, in that case, all of the examples, all of the ideas I've given you here will definitely apply, because what you need to do in that situation is make them want to work with you. So that means you need to create that connection, and you need them looking at you and exchanging with you rather than looking at your screen all the time. So keep your slides simple, and then they'll be looking at you and connecting with you as much as possible.
Great.
Okay.
I learned something there. Very good. Thanks, Phil.
Hope that's helpful.
All right. Second question from George. Very clear question. Yes or no?
Thank you, George.
Is it a good idea to have bullet points with a single word on the slides?
No. Why not? I like the idea of keeping things simple. Absolutely. Thank you, George. Keeping it simple is good, so a single word can be fine. Do you need the bullet point, though? Because when the audience sees that list of bullet points, puff, 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 it will just remind them subconsciously of all of the terrible presentations they've seen in the past and which they don't want to see again. So sometimes in my training courses, I will actually show a slide which does have a list of points. And sometimes, like George said, there'll just be one word. But I don't have the bullet point there because you don't need it. As long as you don't have paragraphs of text and then you want to have puff, 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 here are my 3 bullet points, you don't always need the bullet. So I would try to ban the bullet, but by all means keep just a few words.
Okay, cool. So let's move on so we can cover more questions. From Leia, very timely question. I'm working remotely. What can I do to create impactful remote presentations, and how can I lead an online remote meeting?
Okay, now that's a big question, and it's something which a lot of us are feeling right now, because I'm working with a lot of companies who are canceling their meetings and who need to take their meetings online. Now, Ideas on Stage, we've been doing this for 10 years. We've been working remotely for 10 years. And before that, I was doing it at Hewlett-Packard, where I managed a European team in a situation of a travel freeze. So I had people who were working for me who I could never go and see. So we did online meetings even back then. And there are many things that you can learn to succeed. The first thing is really all of the stuff I've talked to you about presentations here is valid in those situations, but you've really got to turn the hourglass of their attention over even more regularly, because in many cases you can't see them and they know you can't see them. So one of the tips that I will always do in that kind of meeting is, in the first 5 minutes, I will ask somebody a question. Now, this isn't what I did earlier on today, because this is a peculiar situation with this webinar. But if I'm in a meeting, then I will ask a named person a question in the first 5 minutes. So after maybe 3 minutes, I will say, so, Alexander, so what do you think about this? Now, there's a very good chance that hearing that, Alexander will suddenly scramble. Oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat that, please? Probably because Alexander was checking his Facebook feed or whatever else it might be. And I then politely repeat the question. Alexander gives a fantastic answer. And from that point on in the meeting, he's paying attention because he doesn't want it to happen again. Because he knows everyone else knows exactly what just happened. But everyone else knows what happened too. They know that they don't want it to happen to them. So then if your meeting goes on for more than 15 minutes, you ask somebody else another question. And then it makes sure that people actually feel like they have to pay attention. It's a little bit Machiavellian, but sometimes you actually need to do these things. But really, try as much as possible with these meetings to make them interactive. And if there's only one thing I would say about managing people who are working at home, it's over-communicate. Try and reach out to everybody regularly. use social media tools like Slack to stay in touch with people, to have a kind of a virtual water cooler. Don't overdo the communication, but in some cases, you've got to communicate more than you would if you were at the office. So in my company, for example, we work remotely. We've got offices in several countries. We have 2 meetings a week, one which is to talk about sales and another one which is to talk about development and any other business, if you like. And it's important to have those regular touch points so that people who are at home still feel the sense of community that they would get at the office. That's really important.
Great. All right, we're going to shift to a different part of it. So I work in a question from Lisa. I work in an international company, but work in English,
Yep.
but I'm not an English native. And I feel my presentations are good, but are lacking confidence because of my accent. What can you recommend in order to improve my presentations, basically, for non-native?
Okay, so for non-native speakers, Lisa, thank you first for your question. And your situation is the same as many people, right? There are far more people who present in English who are not native speakers than those who are. This is really important for native speakers like me to remember. We have problems. I need to speak more slowly because naturally I will speak more quickly than I'm doing today. Actually, I would say, Lisa, you have an advantage over people like me because your English is probably closer to that of your audience. So you may have a vocabulary which is a bit more limited in English than mine. And that's great because so does your audience. And also, you will hopefully be speaking a bit more slowly. Now, I often find, although, and I mean, I work in France and I work with a lot of French people, and a lot of French people are very worried about their accent, right? They will speak, I do not like my accent. I've even worked with billionaires who said to me, oh, I really do not like my accent when I am speaking in English. You know what? In English, we love that kind of accent. It's great. It's positive. The only thing is, be clear. Speak reasonably slowly. Make sure every syllable is easy to understand. And honestly, we won't mind about the accent. Yes, in some cases, you will want to work on it and you'll want to work with it with a coach. But really, with 5 to 10 sessions with a specialist speaking coach who knows what it's like to present in public, will probably be enough to get you to a level where you feel comfortable with it and your audience loves it. It doesn't take that much. But seriously, worry more about being clear than about sounding like an English or an American person. Be proud of your accent.
Can't agree more. I like some, makes it a bit more unique, right?
Exactly. I mean, God, if everybody spoke with the perfect Queen's English accent, the world would be an extremely boring place indeed.
Cool. All right, let's move on. Question from Simone. I think you mentioned about it, but could you please provide titles of the books on slide presentations? I think you mentioned a couple of them.
Absolutely.
Maybe just repeat that, and in particular on slides.
Yeah, so particularly on slides, the one that we often use in some of our training courses is slideology. So it's like the word slide and then ology like a science. And it's written by Nancy Duarte. She also has a new book out. We've just got it. It's called Data Story. And that's all about presenting data. So that's available from bookstores. Have a check on that. Slideology has been out for several years now and is published in many languages. It's a fantastic resource to understand how to produce slides, how to use graphs, how to use diagrams, how to use photos, etc. And that's one where on every page there's a lot of wisdom. And that, again, comes from somebody, Nancy Duarte. She runs a presentation design firm in Silicon Valley. They've been going longer than we have. They've been going since, I think, the very late 80s. And they have worked with a lot of the most important presentations, at least in the West Coast of America. People like Al Gore have worked with them. Many of the top people in Silicon Valley have worked with them. So they know presentations inside out. And this is the result of a lot of practical work. So slideology is well worth looking at. The other one I mentioned is Presentation Zen Design. This is by Gar Reynolds, who is an American who lives in Japan. And he has applied the Japanese principles of simplicity and restraint and naturalness to presentations, which gave the book Presentation Zen, the blog at presentationzen.com. But then he's also, because he's a really good designer, he's produced a second book, which is called Presentation Zen Design, which is a very useful resource for producing the kind of slides that I've talked about today. So maybe what we can do is we can share all of these. If you're interested, we can share these by email afterwards so that you have a kind of a reading list as next steps.
Cool. Yeah, we can definitely share that. All right, let's move on. A couple more minutes.
Yep.
Even though we're almost out of time, but let's just try to go on for a little bit more. Question from Nathan. Can I come to Phil if I need personal presentation training?
Absolutely. That's what we do. So I'll be delighted to hear from you if you're interested in personal presentation training or coaching for you or for your company. By all means, contact us. We'll be very happy to hear from you.
Even if people are in Asia, US, whatever?
Anywhere. We have coached people from Bhutan to Brazil. So the idea of doing speaker coaching and presentation preparation when you're not in the same room as people, we've been doing that for 10 years anyway. So the fact that we're now on lockdown and we can't always move to people, well, that's not new for us. So wherever you are, we can adapt to you and we'll be very happy to help.
All right, cool. So 2 more last questions, and we'll need to really close up because it's already time.
Yep.
All right, cool. So question from Daksh. What's the ideal time for a presentation? You mentioned 5 minutes, but is that enough for a concept presentation?
Ooh, it depends. If you're Apple and you're going to make a product launch presentation and you're going to want to show what those products are doing, etc., 45 minutes is probably fine. All I will say is there is no right or wrong answer. It depends on you, on your audience, on the context, and I guess it depends on what you've got to say to them. So the one rule I will say is make it as short as possible, but not shorter.
All right, cool. Question from, I'm probably going to mispronounce, Torkild. Very cool one. Years back, I saw a presentation where one slide was deliberately put upside down. That brought the necessary attention for the moment. What's your take on that?
I think that's fantastic. That's a great idea to turn over that hourglass and get people's attention back again. Right? Sometimes I will do stuff in my training courses where I'll just suddenly show something which looks completely stupid or whatever, just to see whether people are reacting to it, or just to say, that was just to check you were awake. And just the simple thing of, that's to check you were awake, will wake people up if they weren't. So it's really important to find interesting ways to do that. It's not only things you show on the screen, it can be things you do as well. And sometimes a great way to just get people to wake up is silence. And then people will wonder why things are so quiet. That can work really well. Great idea though, I like that.
All right. Okay, I'm just checking with our team to see. Okay, let's keep going for a couple more questions.
Sure.
So, all right, question I get from George. Can you please give some examples of transformation after presentation? What kind of transformation do you think usually happens in an audience?
Okay. Excellent question. So what does transformation actually mean? Well, imagine you're making an investor pitch. So you're running a startup and you need to raise funds. So you make a pitch in front of investors. Your aim is to raise money. So what you want is that at the end of the pitch, the audience actually wants to reach for their checkbook, or they want to know more. So after the presentation, they will ask you for another meeting, or they will ask you for a detailed business plan, whatever it might be. If the only aim for that kind of presentation is that they know everything there is to know about your startup, then fine, they might know it, but they might not want to invest. So the objective is to make them want to invest, and that means they need to believe that this is an interesting idea which has a very good chance of success. They need to believe that you are a suitable founder who is worthy of their attention and their money, and they need to feel trusting, but also enthusiastic and curious. So that's one example. In a sales presentation, clearly you need to make them want to buy. Sometimes in an all-employee presentation, or if we think about some of the presentations that our health minister is giving right now, sometimes the aim is to reassure people. It's not just to deliver information about what is our response to this new virus, it's to reassure people. Sometimes it is to provoke action. Please wash your hands regularly, several times a day, etc. But it's not just about information. It's all about action, about feeling, about belief, and that is what I call transformation.
Great. I think we can stop on the word transformation because that's what it's about. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks Phil for doing this great talk. There's still a couple of questions unanswered. We'll answer them later on. We can use Livestorm for that. I think that's it for today.
Yeah,
right?
well, I'd just like to give a very short conclusion. What we've seen today is really just the tip of the iceberg. This is really an introduction to the business presentation revolution, and I hope that you will join us in changing the way that you present as well. But in the words of Sir Winston Churchill, I would really ask you to think this isn't the end. Not even the beginning of the end, even though it's the end of this webinar, but for you and your new way of presenting, a new way of making your audiences enjoy your presentations and your way of transforming them, it's perhaps just the end of the beginning. So today I hope I've shown you the way, and I hope you will be able to follow it and trace the rest of that journey. And maybe we can do that together as well. So if you need more help from me or from my colleagues at Ideas on Stage, you'll find us at ideasonstage.com, and we'll be very, very happy to help you. And I hope that we'll be able to link up as well on Invitely. And if you've not joined Invitely yet, then I encourage you to do so. It's run by a great bunch of people, and I'm very sure it can be a really great help to you and to your career. So thanks for the invitation. Thanks to you for your participation. And I hope to see you again.
Thanks a lot for joining, guys. Thank you very much. And watch out for the follow-up email with resources, books, etc. That's it for today. Cool. That's it. We're going offline, I think. I don't think we've got anything to do. But again, thank you very much. And join us for the next webinar series. So stay tuned. And thank you again.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.